What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the Canadian Football Fanatics YouTube channel. Here we are back again, Canada West Football Show, week number 2. As always, I'll be joined by Matt Young here in a moment. But what you guys can expect on a weekly basis. Matt will be joining me. We'll be recapping the week previous. We had a great week in Canada West action. I'm excited to get Matt's thoughts on that. And then every other week, we'll maybe be joined by a player or maybe another personality in the Canada West. Maybe someone like, Darren DuPont, Justin Dunk, one of Matt Young's colleagues, something like that. Connor O'Neill, somebody along those lines. And then obviously tonight, we will be joined by University of Manitoba Bison's receiver, A.K. Gasama, here in about 15 or so minutes, just finishing up practice. And then he'll join us for about 15, 20, and that'll wrap up the show once again. So, like I mentioned, Matt Young joining us once again. So let's bring up Matt. Matt, thanks for joining me. How you doing?
Hey, good to be here with you and good to be chatting more Canada West college football. A fantastic week 2 in the books, and now we get ready for week 3.
Yes, and fantastic week it was. But unfortunately, with our weekly picks, the panel, I guess if you want to call it, isn't doing so well. I know we've been getting some heat, all in good fun though. I think is kind of my intention with starting this is create some conversation online, right? Whether we're right or wrong. I think engaging with some of the fan bases, some of the teams. Personally, I like kind of the back and forth jabbing and stuff like that, and hopefully they can take it as long as they can give it. And obviously they're giving it right now with our records not being too good, but I think that just makes for the great Canada West action that we've been accustomed to seeing here in previous years, and just adds to another fantastic year. So let's maybe go back a little bit here, Matt, and talk about last week's action, starting with UBC Manitoba. Did you get a chance to watch that game or watch maybe the highlights, and what were your thoughts?
I got a chance to watch a chunk of that game, and I think when I look at that, it kind of confirms in my mind what I thought Manitoba was going to bring this season, which is an offense that can score points. And I think it starts to start a conversation about UBC and whether or not the UBC Thunderbirds are looking like the team that could possibly make another run at a Hardy Cup championship, because a lot of people felt they might have another shot at it. They brought a lot of guys back on defense. They also lost a lot of bodies. You think of the offensive line, and you think of guys like Mano and Theo Benedict, who went to the NFL, and whether or not the UBC Thunderbirds would be able to find someone that could fill those big shoes. But look, I said it last week. I think that Manitoba offense is going to score some points, and I think they're going to make it very difficult for teams like UBC and others, and especially their secondary. If you want to beat the Manitoba Bisons, your secondary is going to have to be really, really good, especially with guys like A.K. Kasama and Jackson Dushinsky, who can throw and run the ball, which is a combination you don't see a whole lot of in college football. Some players are really good at it. Some players, they like to be in the pocket and get rid of the ball quickly. Some players don't mind running. Others are not very fast. But Jackson Dushinsky, I think, can do it all. And so I think that Manitoba team, with plenty to play for, obviously, because Brian Dobie, it's his last season. I think a lot of players are putting in a performance, really of their generation for Manitoba Bison football. So I think if you're the Bisons, I mean, you're riding in week 3 in a pretty big high. Now they got a tough game. They play the Alberta Golden Bears, which I felt would probably be in the upper echelon of Canada West as well. And we'll talk about what happened with them against Calgary. But and I think that it told me what I thought, that Manitoba was going to have a good offense. They put up again, I think it was 33 points, and came out with what I would say a pretty decisive victory against the UBC Thunderbirds.
Yeah, well said, Matt. As you mentioned there, Manitoba scoring 33. They beat the UBC Thunderbirds 33 to 10. And I guess I'll start with UBC, and UBC was able to jump out once again to an early lead, 10-0, I believe. But then after that, by judge of the final score, obviously, weren't able to find points after that point on. You talk about Manitoba's offense, and we'll talk a little bit about that afterwards, I'm sure, and hopefully with our guest that's joining us here later. But explosive, I believe 26 points there in the second quarter, and was able to kind of really take over the game from that point on. And I think they scored their first touchdown with a few minutes into the second quarter. And once they gained that lead, they really didn't look back from the UBC Thunderbirds. There, they were able to get another cash in with another Braden Stubbs touchdown there in the second half to complete that 33-10 victory. But overall, we talked about it last week as well, Matt, of, just a very veteran team, a lot of fourth and fifth year guys that have been coming back. They understand the schemes and program now, and just really excited. I think Manitoba is going to be a team to be reckoned with in the Canada West. But UBC, they definitely, you mentioned the big names, Giovanni Manu, Theo Benedet, but they also, they got a lot of guys coming back, Sam Davenport, some of the guys that they obviously were maybe gonna lose to, draft. A lot of them came back. I believe Ryan Baker, Jarrell Cummings, Mitchell Townsend, if I'm not mistaken. A lot of still similar guys in that on that defense and on that offense. Isaiah Knight, Garrett Rooker. Garrett Rooker really hasn't looked like the Garrett Rooker we've seen in the last few years through the first two games. But I just question kind of now whether or not how UBC is gonna, fight their way out of the corner here. Are they gonna, kind of curl up now and kind of maybe start to guess, and then that starts to creep in and cracks become even bigger, or are they gonna get better from this? And it doesn't get any easier going, going to a Regina and a 2-0 Regina team that's feeling a lot of confidence right now. So going to be an interesting week for UBC to see if they can bounce back. But Manitoba, I'm really liking what I'm seeing from them, and excited to talk about it with our guest here that's joining us here shortly. So, any other thoughts, maybe Matt, on that game before we move on?
Well, I would say for UBC, I mean, the turnovers and interceptions are definitely a problem, and your Garrett Rooker is not looking like the Garrett Rooker that we know, and the Garrett Rooker that can go out there and complete a last minute drive. So, I mean, I think that, him and Sam Davenport, and Davenport's an excellent receiver. I saw him in the Hardy Cup last year. He is an A1 receiver for that squad. They're going to have to find a way to get themselves on the same page. And defensively, I mean, you're all right. You are right. They lost some guys, but they have a lot of people that are returning. And I think that defensively, Blake Mills got to be shaking his head. They're giving up nearly 40 points a game now through the first two games, and they've got to shut that down. And I think it's getting in the film room, figuring out what the mistakes are. I mean, is it coverage? Is it personnel just not being in the right place at the right time? Blake Mills is a great coach, and that whole UBC organization is a good organization. When we talk about picking teams, we're not picking between good teams and bad teams. We're picking between good teams and really good teams, right? And so I think there have been some surprises. I would not be surprised, though, if UBC, if they find a way to right the ship, if they climb right back into it. But this week will be a pretty crucial matchup coming up.
Yeah, and Garrett Rooker, I believe, was pulled there later in the fourth quarter for Derek Engel. Obviously, kind of with that situation, a guy obviously an American coming up to play some U Sports football. I don't think by any means it's a question, but I wonder how much that we've seen him now through the first 2 weeks. There have been a lot of packages for him where he's been on the field, thrown a couple balls. So I wonder how much now with Garrett kind of not looking like himself, they start to try to get him on the field a little bit more to get some of those sparks and maybe spark the UBC Thunderbirds offense, because it definitely hasn't looked like last year's bunch. So let's get to the next game here, Matt. And that was Regina winning, snapping their 8-game losing streak to the University of Saskatchewan with a 33-28 victory. What were your thoughts on this one?
Well, this was a wild game, and it was a thriller because it was back and forth. I mean, the Rams come out to the big lead, and then you got some wild plays. You had a blocked punt that went back for a touchdown the other way for the Saskatchewan Huskies. And then the Rams come right back and end up winning that game. The Huskies, I think, got 21 points in the second quarter. So, I mean, that was a very topsy-turvy matchup. The Rams obviously happy to come out with a big win, not by much, but they beat their provincial rivals. But now they're 2-0, and teams are going to start looking at them as, could they possibly host a home playoff game or even a Hardy Cup this year? But I think you got to hand it to Noah Peltier. He comes in for Owen Sieben, who was injured last week, and he threw for over 300 yards. But one thing that's interesting, and I double checked this today because I was looking at one and the teams that lost, and for the Regina Bisons, two teams that won. Of course, we'll talk about Calgary. The interesting thing, their quarterbacks, no interceptions. And when you don't turn over the ball, there's a good chance that you're probably going to come out with a victory. So, I mean, that doesn't mean there wasn't any other issues, but you got to hand it to Noah Peltier, who came in. He did a great job throwing for 359 yards, 3 touchdowns, including a long 45-yard play. That's a man that's got to be happy. And Mark McConkey has got to be pretty happy because he knows that when Owen Sieben comes back, whenever he comes back, if he comes back, he's got a couple of guys now on the roster that he knows that are proven, and they're pretty deep at quarterback, which certainly can't hurt you over the course of a Canada West season. So I think for the Regina Rams, they're pretty happy. Got to clean up some issues. Again, the block punt that went for a touchdown for the Saskatchewan Huskies. Can't afford to have too many plays on special teams. And that's the kind of stuff that can really throw a game the other way. A mistake on penalties mistake on special teams, a return all the way back to the house for the other team the other way. I think Regina is going to want to sort of settle that up pretty quickly. And I think for the Saskatchewan Huskies, for Scott Flory, you got to figure out exactly what went wrong. Special teams played well. Defense, did okay, but Regina was able to put up quite a number of yards. And I think for Scott Flory, again, it's getting back in the room and figuring out, okay, where do we need to be better? Where do we need to clean things up? Because after you get to week 2, once you've been through week 2, now teams, they've got plenty of film on you. They've seen everybody play. They know what some of the teams are doing early on. You start to get to week 3, and now it becomes the real chess match. Who can move the pieces on the board the way they want to go? You're kind of feeling everybody out throughout the first couple of weeks of the season. Now you head into week 3. Here's where you can really start to make a lot of your adjustments, and we'll see if the Huskies can do that.
Yeah, I really have been like when I've seen from Regina, especially after being able to go back and rewatch that game. You mentioned Noah Pelche, 4 total touchdowns. I believe he had another rushing touchdown as well.
That's right. That's right.
Only 5 incompletions on the day, almost as many touchdowns as he did incompletions. A great story as well. I believe the team starter in 2022 was the team starter going into the season last year. I believe got injured, and Owen Sieben obviously took over the reins from there. Won, Canada West Rookie of the Year after that. And, next man up mentality, I'm sure, in Regina, right? Where, injuries happen throughout a long season, like you just mentioned. And, Noah's kind of stepped in there seamlessly and has played very well through, the first game and a half or whatever you want to call it. But Regina, man, they are very, I like their weapons offensively with obviously Deshaun Mims, who we talked about last week, but had another game, terrific game, was able to score, I believe, on their second play offensively for them. And then another one is that Nick Sirleaf, who's I believe, ex Calgary Colt, CJFL alum, who's a first year of eligibility player for the Regina Rams, is an explosive player as well. He caught a long, deep touchdown down the right sideline. And then some of those other guys, is it Aranaza, I believe, number 85, who's another younger fella. They actually got the first touch of the game, and then I believe it would be the credit as the winning touchdown of the game as well. Did have the late fumble to give a little bit of a scare to Regina fans, and I believe they were only up 3 points at that time when he fumbled there late. But I thought he'd been playing pretty well up to that point. And then another younger running back, I believe, that Garwood was another fast guy, had an explosive run.
Yeah, Javon Garwood did very well.
If he can get into the open field, man, he's a home run hitter for sure.
Yeah.
And I think that just adds to Saskatchewan. They're feeling themselves now. On defense, Cameron Maw had been making some plays here through the first few weeks. I believe he had an interception week 1, had a sack here, a big time sack there, and late in the fourth quarter. Tyreek Pullis is another guy, a junior guy, I believe, from the Okanagan Sun. Had a sack and a half and was very disruptive in the backfield around Anton Ammonrood. And obviously other guys that they have, like Jackson Sombach, obviously CFL draft pick this past year. Dolan Robinson's been out, I believe, this game. I don't know if he got banged up in their week 1 matchup or not, but missed this game. And a lot of good players on that Regina team, and I think they're starting to believe now, which is going to be and even more amplify their skills even more. I think going into the meat and potatoes, I guess, of the schedule now when they get into the middle of the season.
Well, and they have a quarterback in Noah Pelche who's been to the playoffs. So this isn't new for him. I mean, they have a quarterback who has some experience, and he got them to the playoffs in his rookie year. So, I mean, Noah Pelche, look, when somebody goes down for Regina, it's next man up. And they've done that so far this season. And you're right. The pieces are coming together. I'm interested when they go up against some teams like Manitoba and Alberta on the road. But they absolutely, they are a team that's proving to be good enough to challenge for, I think, a home playoff game this year. And we'll see if they can continue to roll the dice and remain undefeated because they're 2-0 right now.
Yep, Regina Rams 2-0 after their 33-28 victory over the Saskatchewan Huskies. So last game of last week, we had an unbelievable game. I couldn't believe when I was on social media this game was blowing up with all the Canada West posts and whatnot. The Calgary Dinos winning over the University of Alberta 36-22 with 3 pick sixes for the University of Calgary, but that was not all in the game. I believe they had 4 pick sixes total. University of Alberta actually started the game with a pick six. I believe it was Charlie Deland, if I'm not mistaken, number 8 for the University of Alberta. Started the game with a pick six. And then number 28, I believe that Nate Boscheman for the University of Calgary had his first pick six. Gideon Ajay had the second one, and then Nate had his second one of the game there. And the Calgary Dinos did not have a offensive touchdown. They chipped in with 5 other field goals. So to throw it back to you, Matt, have you ever seen a team win with 36 points but not score an offensive touchdown?
Oh, I'll tell you what, it's pretty rare. I don't think I've ever seen that before. I don't think I've ever seen a team in college football or even pro football. It'd be pretty rare. I'd have to really look back to see if a team has won a game with 3 pick sixes. But the Calgary Dinos did that. Now, I mean, let's just circle back. We sat here last week and you asked, okay, what is it going to take for the Calgary Dinos to beat an Alberta team that's pretty good, pretty high up there. The coaches poll, a lot of teams thought they could make a run at the Hardy Cup, and Calgary's got a good team too, and they got a new coach and they've got a lot of good pieces there. But could they overcome the hills that are the Alberta Golden Bears? And we felt one way they had to do it, and they were going to have to do it was on their defense, and they absolutely did. And when I watch, especially on the interceptions, I see a couple of good things. I see some good coverage. I'm probably not mistaken in saying that Eli Hetlinger probably wished he had some of those throws back. I think on the first one, maybe not quite enough mustard on it. And that allowed the Calgary cornerback to jump in there and grab the ball and run it back for a touchdown. So, I mean, I think if you're Alberta, Eli Hetlinger is going to be looking at what went wrong here because that's an uncharacteristic game from him. But, I mean, you had Ethan Ball from the Calgary Dinos, had, I think, 8 or 9 tackles in that game. He played very, very well. You have, guys like Nate Boscheman who are just everywhere. I mean, he covers the field like a glove, at the right place at the right time. And you know what? Hats off to Calgary's defense. Are they going to be able to keep up that pace and get 3 returns for touchdowns off interceptions every game? Going to probably be pretty tough. But look, you could say that they dismantled one of the better teams in Canada West. Now, if they could figure out the offensive issues and move the ball a bit better offensively, I think Calgary is absolutely a scare for everybody. I mean, keep in mind, this is a team that this season has actually more defensive touchdowns than they actually do offensive touchdowns through 2 weeks of the year. So, I mean, that defense is looking scary good. They weren't able to put it together in week 1 against Regina, but they were able to against Alberta. Now, I think the goal is, can they get the Britton brothers and everyone else on offense rolling as well? And if they can do that, combined with what looks to be a pretty good secondary, Calgary is going to be pretty good. On the other side for the Alberta Golden Bears, that's a better team than probably they showed on paper. It's not characteristic of them to give up that many points, and certainly their offense is usually much better, and they'll want to right the ship this week. Eli Hetlinger and company are going to be looking at the game film and trying to figure out what went wrong and know what to do to make things go. But hats off to the Calgary Dinos. Hey, they came out, got the job done. They say defense wins championships, and they took down a championship contender last week. Now they roll into week 3.
Yeah, they don't ask how, they just ask how many. So
that's right.
It doesn't matter if the offense doesn't chip, and I shouldn't say doesn't chip in. They had the 5 field goal drives that obviously got them into scoring position. So the offense, not able to be efficient inside the red zone, that sort of stuff, and being able to cash in with 7s instead of 3s, I think could go a long way for the Dinos. I think,
I just want to add, not to take credit from Alberta's defense too. I mean, they had an interception run back for a touchdown. Like Alberta's defense played very, very well. I mean, if you take away those 3 pick sixes that Calgary has, and if you take away the defensive touchdowns, this is a close game. So, I mean, I think for both sides, it was a bad day for the offense. Much worse for Alberta than it was for Calgary. But hey, we roll into week 3, and here we are. We've got an Alberta team that is going to go up against Manitoba, and what I think is going to be a great matchup, and it's going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, and for one key thing, I think that probably was a little bit unnoticed or untalked about, I think, but was no Matthew Peterson for the University of Alberta. I think is obviously a pretty without doesn't have to say much. The reigning Canada West Player of the Year. Goes a long way in that offense. Is the engine of that team, the straw that stirs the drink over there for University of Alberta. So I'm not too sure if it's a long term thing, but I believe it was the Oshinabe, I believe, was getting a majority of the carries, and then number 31 as well. Matthew Peterson wasn't on the stat sheet, so he wasn't. I don't think he got nicked up during the game. I don't think he dressed, if I'm not mistaken. So a big part of University of Alberta and what they bring offensively and as a team. I know Chevy Thomas is a guy that we talked about last week, can be a big weapon for
Yep.
them. He chipped in
Yep.
with a touchdown as well for them, but
Good receiver.
very good receiver. Without a guy like Matthew Peterson, I think a few more of those drives they maybe could have leaned on him instead of Eli's arm. And beside those 3 pick sixes, shout out to Steen Rasmussen, friend of the show, and hopefully he's watching. I know Nanaimo BC guy playing at the University of Calgary, number 41. He had an interception as well, his second this season. So 2 in 2 games. That'll boy Steen keep playing well, and should be interesting to see how the Dinos continue from here. Like you were just talking about some of the matchups here this week, they should be very interesting. So before AK joins us here after practice, I guess maybe just get your thoughts here quickly on the few matchups this week, Matt. So maybe I guess let's start with Calgary and Saskatchewan. What are your thoughts on that one?
Well, I mean, this is a big game for both teams, and you talk about Calgary coming off a huge high, a big win over Alberta, and Saskatchewan coming off a close game against the Regina Rams. I mean, I think if you're the Saskatchewan Huskies, and you're Scott Flory and company, you've got to figure out a way to eliminate some of the state mistakes, but also be a bit more consistent. I think on offense and on defense, they have a good quarterback in Anton Amador. You talk about Daniel Weeb and players like that. Like they've got a good core there. It's just tightening things up, and they almost won that game against Regina. They put up a pretty good fight, and their special teams played well. And sometimes that's what you need. It's just a big play. So I think that Saskatchewan Huskies, that they haven't been blown out necessarily, but they've played fairly well last week against Regina. We'll see what they can do this week against Calgary. And I think it's the Calgary Dinos. It's offense. I think the defense is decent. I think that their secondary can cause some problems, and maybe it's something that they discovered on film or saw on film that the Alberta Golden Bears were doing that allowed them to have great coverage and essentially put that game away through 3 pick sixes for touchdowns. But I think for Calgary, you want to see that offense start to roll. And if that Calgary offense starts to roll, combined with what looks like a pretty good defense, I think that poses some trouble for the Saskatchewan Huskies. Although I think Saskatchewan is going to rebound. They are getting closer. I mean, they barely lost. I won't say barely, but they lost only by a few points to the Regina Rams. And I think Anton Amador, I think he can do it, and he's got some good weapons. It's just a matter of putting it all together now. And I think Scott Flory is a very good coach. I would say that this is going to be a close one between these two teams. It's going to be a battle, but I'm excited to see what they both bring coming into this week.
Yeah, I'm interested to see as well. By the time we post this, Matt, our picks will be out, so don't have to hide who we're picking. You obviously took the Huskies in this one. I'm actually the lone one who took the Dinos. I too think this will be a close game. I think why I took the Dinos is I think defensively, both teams are kind of up to par with each other, and I think the Dinos offense will hopefully be able to do enough with Saskatchewan's. I think offense you could probably argue as of now going into this game is probably played better than Calgary through 2 games with, Daniel Weeb, who's had a phenomenally, I believe he's up over 300 yards already and like around 15, 16 receptions with 3 touchdowns there after having I think 5 or 6 receptions, 100-yard and 2 touchdown game this past week. I think there's some question marks about that Saskatchewan Huskies offense as well. Riker Frank's a guy who I like as well on that offense. I think is a guy that runs hard, but outside of that, I think there is still some question marks. I think their defense will be able to keep them in the game, but I'm going to take Calgary on this one. And maybe I kind of definitely second guess myself when everyone turned in Saskatchewan, but I'm going to kind of back my initial thoughts and my initial instincts there, going with Calgary. And I think defensively, hopefully they'll be able to pull this one out. So far this year, I believe Amador's kind of taken care of the ball pretty well, but I believe last year he led the Canada West in interceptions with double digits. So hopefully Calgary's defense is able to kind of do their thing once again and get their offense some extra possession so that they're able to cash in. So,
Well, and you make some good points. I mean, for either squad, they've got to limit the turnovers, right? You cannot have the fumbles, you cannot have the interceptions. I mean, I know for the Saskatchewan Huskies, they blocked a punt for a touchdown, but for Calgary, I mean, you can't allow the Huskies to do that, or any team. So I think they gotta. I think you bring up a good point. Look, when we pick again, we're not picking between good teams and bad teams. We're picking between good teams and other good teams, right? So hey, look, I might be 2-4, I might be 1-5. But I just love the fact that people are talking about college football in Canada because it deserves that kind of talk and that kind of recognition. And hey, we want to hear what your picks are out there. I mean, tell me what you think between Regina, between Saskatchewan and Calgary, or UBC, or Manitoba taking on Alberta. I mean, or UBC and Regina, whoever might be playing each other. You know, give us your picks. We want to hear. But right now, I would say you could probably go either way on this game. I'm picking the Huskies just by a hair. But hey, I mean, Calgary, can they absolutely win? Yeah, they did. They just took down one of the best teams in Canada West last week quite handily.
And in Alberta as well, I think, not a long travel trip, but, to go into enemy territory, a different stadium, right, I think is even more impressive. So Alberta and Manitoba, I think one that all Canada West fans should be excited for. Hopefully Matthew Pearson's back for this one too. I think make it even more of an exciting game. But what are your thoughts on this one, Matt? And obviously, I believe you took the University of Alberta, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, so when you talk about the Alberta Golden Bears and you talk about the Manitoba Bisons, you're talking about two teams that absolutely can score. I'm picking the Manitoba Bisons on this one simply because I think that their offense seems to be a little bit more honed in. And there's something special, I think, growing in Manitoba right now. I think the Manitoba Bisons, at the beginning of the year, I said, don't sleep on them. They weren't my pick for week one. But they are my pick this week, and it's tight again. Alberta's going to come back. This is going to be a rebound game for Eli Hetlinger, but I think after last week, there's some things that obviously have got to be cleared up, especially as far as throwing the ball goes, because 3 interceptions is not going to help you win any game. But you look at Jackson Dushinsky. Braden Stubbs had another game, another day over 100 yards rushing on the ground last week. I mean, the offensive line seems to be just pushing people around. So again, you have two good teams. Who do you pick? It's pretty tough. I think Alberta can win just as much as Manitoba, but I'm going to give it to the Bisons on this one. There's something special going on. I mean, that's a great story in Manitoba right now with Brian Dobie and it being his last season. And I'm just double checking. Yeah, this game is at home for the Manitoba Bison. So, you kind of look at the tiny little intangibles. Again, I'll pick Manitoba by a field goal maybe. But these are two offenses that can score. Don't kid yourself. They've proven it. And I'm excited to see them shoot out the lights coming up this week. But I got the Bisons going ahead. But hey, it's Canada West. Anything can happen. And I love it when it does.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this game, like I mentioned there before, I think depends on the status of Matthew Pearson if he's able to play. I'm still going to stick with the Manitoba Bisons as well. I think, they also say confidence is a hell of a drug, and I think once that snowball starts to get bigger and bigger, once you push it down the hill, it's hard to stop. And I think that's the herd right now. The Bisons maybe a better analogy. Once that herd gets going, I think it's going to be hard to stop, or nobody's going to want to get in front of it. So they are a very motivated bunch right now. They're playing very well, and a veteran-led group, as we mentioned there in the first segment as well. I think they're going to be ready to play and be very amped up for this one to be at home and to know they're playing against a good opponent in the Alberta Golden Bears. So last one here, Matt, for hopefully AK joins us before our time runs out. But University of British Columbia will be traveling to Regina, a game we talked about that we thought was going to be interesting for UBC to travel out to Regina. Regina on a high right now at 2-0. What are your thoughts on this one going in, Matt?
Well, I think this. I mean, look, you only play 8 games a season, and I think that when you look at these two teams, so you got Regina at 2-0, and you got UBC at 0-2. If you fall to 0-3, it becomes difficult to climb back into it, but not impossible because 4 of the 6 teams obviously make the playoffs. So I think if you're the UBC Thunderbirds, it's a long trek You're going into Regina, a team that's very, very high, brimming with confidence right now. And I think you have a team that certainly can put the ball in the air and can move the ball on the ground as well. And I think you're walking into potentially an atmosphere, really a confident group in the Regina Rams. And I think so for UBC, this is very important. Garrett Rooker and Sam Davenport, or Derek Engel, whoever starts, they have to be on the same page. And the other thing is they can't afford to turn over the ball too much. If there's too many turnovers, you rack up 2 or 3 interceptions. Regina's going to get the ball down the field, and they got some big pieces there. So I think for the UBC Thunderbirds rolling into Regina, it's not a must win yet. Let's be clear. This is only week 3. But if they lose this game, it's going to become must wins in a hurry. And I think it's all about figuring out on offense what exactly they need to do to put more points on the board. And Blake Nill will figure that out. I mean, he's got a fantastic coaching staff over there at UBC, experienced. And again, they're used to getting to or making it to Hardy Cup. So this is a bit of an unusual situation for UBC to fall 0-2 like this. But they're here, or they're headed to Regina. And this is going to be a good clash. And I think for the Regina Rams, if they start 3-0, that's a huge, huge feather in their cap. Suddenly now you're playing for potentially a home playoff game near the end of the season. So I think it's a big game for both teams, probably a little bit bigger right now for the UBC Thunderbirds to try and gain some confidence back. But hey, I mean, this is going to be fun to watch, and it could go either way.
Yeah, well said. I think, as I mentioned with Manitoba, with Regina, once that snowball gets rolling, I think their confidence is at all-time high as of now. Going into this one at home, I would expect them to play, explosively, offensively, and then defensively. Try to get some pressure on Garrett Rooker. He hasn't looked comfortable there in the first few weeks. If they're able to do that, I think they have the secondary to hang with some of those guys. Maybe we'll see if Delaney Robinson's able to come back into the lineup here next week. But offensively, I like the matchups for Regina. I think with those 2 guys on the outside, Deshaun Mims and is it Surly, if they're number 1, I think they can kind of stretch the field. They can be playmakers in the intermediate areas as well. And then with that, our Nizia, I believe the number 85 and the tailback as well, they bring a little bit of speed, so they have kind of all sorts of dynamic assets to their offense where you can't really key in on one thing or one specific thing. And then with Noah playing so well right now, he's kind of being that facilitator, that point guard, getting it to all his weapons out there, not really force feeding one guy. So it's even making it even more difficult for the opposing defenses to kind of lock in. And UBC, I just don't know kind of where to gauge them. I feel like I picked them the first 2 weeks. I can't speak for yourself, but expecting a lot more from them going into the year, and I just think they haven't looked like themselves. So I think hopefully they're going to maybe prove me wrong this week, but maybe it's a week that they have to flip the switch here and get things back on the right track. That being said, I'm going to go with Regina this week. I think they're playing very well, and interested to see this one. This one should be another dandy in the Canada West week number 3 action. So, Matt, it's getting to about that time. I'm guessing AK is not going to be joining us here tonight, which is unfortunate. Just try to get a hold of him here on Instagram, but he's not getting back to me. So I'm guessing he's
AK Gasama. I coined the nickname for him last year. I think I talked to him when I was on the field once for a game, and because I had nicknames for certain players because I love doing that. I think it's fun. And I remember I turned to AK Gasama. I said, I got you. I said, how about turn up the gas? Turn up the gas, baby. When it's time to give it some gas, you get an AK Gasama, and he's a great player, and he's fantastic, and he does a great job, and he's a huge weapon for the Manitoba Bisons, and I'm looking forward to seeing more of him, and other guys that we've mentioned so far, who can really turn some heads and blow a game wide open, which is a guy that's what AK Kasama can do. I mean, he can be a game changer. He could be a 40, 50 yard pass you need on a second down late in the game. I mean, he can go up and get a ball. He's agile. He can move. I mean, I like this kid, and I think he can go places. So if you can't join us tonight, AK, we'll catch up with you one day. But he's great, and I love talking to more Canada West players and lifting their profile. It's interesting. When I was young, and Cole, you're probably younger than me. There was no internet streaming of Canada West broadcast games. I mean, you would hope that TSN or somebody would broadcast your game, and they might do one a week. But it wasn't like now where you can pay, 12 or 14 or $20 or get a season package and get all the games live streaming on high definition on the internet. So, I mean, I sometimes wish that, man, when I played minor sports, they had that. They didn't have that back then, but they do now. And I want to showcase some of that. And it'd be nice to talk to some coaches too. I love talking to Mark McConkey and Scott Flory, fantastic guys to talk to, and Brian Doby. I mean, he has all kinds of great, even just stories to tell. And by the way, we mentioned a lot about that Bison's offense. How about Conway and Nick Thomas and those guys? I want to hear more from them, and defensive guys too, not just the Bisons, but a whole bunch of other teams. So this is going to be great, and I think these guys deserve some recognition. I absolutely believe that some of them could play in the NCAA if they had the chance. 100% they could. Hey, week 3's upon us. And like I said, kind of after week 3, you sort of start settling in there and saying, hey, who's going to do what, right? Who could get a home playoff game versus who's going to be fighting for their playoff lives? And so that's why I think week 3 is always, it's kind of the sort of the first hump in the season to kind of see where everybody is. And it's going to be fun to watch. It's going to be great. Starting the 27th, I'm going to be calling some games up in the booth myself, and it's going to be really good. So, and it's also great to see some of the other talent that comes. You mentioned Nicholas Sirleaf, who played junior football, and some of the other guys in the CJFL who either they stick it there or they move over to U Sports, see some of their careers and where they go. So it's fun. We got a lot of football ahead. It's going to be great.
I love your nicknames. Is it Downtown Davenport? What's the one for Sam Davenport?
Sam the Reception Man, because
Yes.
he catches everything that comes his way. Downtown Davenport ain't bad either, though. I like that one. I mean,
you gotta keep them up, Matt. I'm here for the nicknames.
Oh, I love it. Eli Hetlinger, the Book of Eli, right?
Yeah,
Because there's always something in that playbook that he can reach into that will work, right? And I noticed that last season. And so he's really good, and we're going to get nicknames, I think, for everybody on every team at some point. I want to do that because I just want these young guys to sort of remember their university careers and some of the things that they did. So yeah, I mean, a lot of that's coming up ahead, and I think I might start posting some of my own highlight reels like I did last year, which was really fun. They were a big hit. A lot of people loved them, and excited to be back in the booth and calling games this season. So that's going to be fun too. So lots of Canada West football to come up. And, in the meantime, I'm doing Hilltops play-by-play as well. So lots to talk about there for Saskatoon Hilltops and CJFL as well. So it's going to be good over the next few weeks, man.
Yes, and unfortunately, as you mentioned there, AK won't be able to join us tonight. I'm sure just busy after practice, whatever it may be, with his juggling school and football and all that sort of stuff. Hopefully, as you said, we'll be able to get him or many other players on the show here this season. Should be a good time. Maybe we'll even dabble into the coaches' bag as well, as you mentioned there.
There you go.
Pick the brain of some of the coaches around the Canada West as well. So that'll end things here for tonight for me and Matt on another Canada West football show, and we will see you guys next week.